far away from Earth, beyond known stars and silent galaxies. The great space station Varix 9 floated like a metal moon in the cold dark. It was home to more than 300 alien species, some tall and shadow-like, others glowing like liquid, light, and many more that would seem strange to any human eye. It was a place of peace, trade, and secrets. The first time in history a human had been allowed to live there, and his name was Captain Elias Rohn. Nobody knew much about him. Since the moment he arrived, he was covered head to toe in a smooth black containment suit that hid every part of his body, including his face. The station's medical council said it was for safety. No one knew how human biology would react with other species, and the risk of infection or disease was too high. Because of this, Elias became known as the Phantom Envoy, and most aliens avoided getting too close, more out of fear than dislike. He lived in a private chamber deep within the station's diplomatic wing, where only cleaning bots and one living being were allowed to enter. That being was Kira, a Zarnian maid assigned to maintain his space. Kira, like all of her species, had tough greenish skin, for strong arms, and a careful, quiet way of moving. She had worked in the service wing for years, but this assignment was different. She had never spoken much to Elias, just short, polite exchanges through the thick glass door of his chamber. He always seemed calm, kind even, but distant, like a ghost locked away in a suit. One quiet cycle, during the night shift, Kira was finishing her cleaning rounds when a system alert buzzed in her ear. It was a soft tone, nothing urgent, just a reminder that the air filtration system in Elias's room needed checking. She sighed, adjusted her cleaning belt, and headed toward the diplomat's quarters. The door hissed open as usual, and she stepped in without thinking, as she had done dozens of times before. But this time, something was wrong. The air felt warm to warm. There was no hum from the suit's external systems. And then she saw him. Standing by the wide viewing window, bathed in pale starlight, was Elias Rohn. But he was not in his containment suit. He was wearing only simple sleep clothes, and his face, for the first time, was visible. Kira froze. Her heart skipped a beat. She had been warned about human skin, told it might carry unseen poisons or deadly microbes. Yet here he was, bare, exposed, and perfectly at ease. His skin was smooth and pale compared to most species, almost glowing in the soft light. Hair was short and dark, and his eyes, they were sharp, focused, and filled with a quiet sadness. He turned slowly, realizing he wasn't alone, and when he saw Kira standing there, wide-eyed and speechless, his own expression shifted to surprise. "Kira," he said gently, his voice calm but puzzled. "You're not supposed to be in here at this hour?" Kira opened her mouth, but no words came out. She wasn't coughing, she wasn't burning. No alarms were sounding. The biosensors should have triggered the moment she entered an unsafe zone, but they hadn't. Elias noticed this too. He looked at the ceiling, where the silent monitors blinked green. "You're not sick," he said slowly, more to himself than to her. "You're fine." Kira finally found her voice, soft and unsure. "But ... you're not wearing your suit." Elias nodded, walking over to a nearby console. "That's because I stopped wearing it 2 nights ago. I wanted to test something. I thought if I removed it slowly, in stages, the systems would alert me before anything dangerous happened." He paused, his fingers hovering over the controls. "They didn't, and now you're here, breathing the same air." Kira blinked, still trying to understand. "Then, maybe the warnings were wrong. Maybe you're not dangerous." Elias gave a small smile, one that didn't reach his eyes. "Or maybe we've been lied to." The words hung in the air like a heavy fog. In that single moment, something shifted between them. Not just trust, but curiosity, the start of something new. Kira glanced at the monitors again, still green. "Still calm?" She took a cautious step forward. "Why would they lie?" she asked. Elias looked out at the stars, because fear is easier to spread than truth. And with that, the silence returned, but now it was charged with questions too many to ask in one night. Kira remained standing, not out of duty anymore, but because something important had just begun, something that might change everything. Varix thought it knew about humans. Kira stood frozen, staring at Elias with wide, unblinking eyes. Her forehands trembled slightly, though she wasn't sure if it was from fear or something else entirely. She had seen many species during her years aboard Varix beings made of crystal. Others shaped like smoke, but never had she seen anything like this. Human skin, smooth and bare, looked nothing like her own tough, scaled hide. It had a strange softness, a faint glow from the station lights that made him look almost unreal, like something from a dream or a warning tale. His chest rose and fell with each breath, slow and steady. The room was quiet, except for the faint hum of the air circulation system. And every passing second without an alarm felt like a louder question. Why wasn't she getting sick? Where was the danger she had always been taught to fear? Elias, too, looked uncertain, almost nervous, like he was expecting her to collapse at any moment. "You're not dying?" he asked softly, as if saying it out loud might break the fragile calm around them. Kira shook her head, slowly, almost in disbelief. "I don't feel anything. No burning, no pain, nothing." She looked down at her own arms, half expecting them to change color or blister, but they remained the same strong green. How is this possible? Elias moved to the console again, checking the biosensors, the environmental scanners, anything that could explain. What was happening? Everything still showed green. No contamination, no radiation, no biological hazards. For years, everyone believed human exposure would cause instant harm to other species, especially ones with sensitive systems like Kira's. But now, face to face with the truth, that belief seemed to be crumbling. Maybe the data was wrong, Elias muttered, more to himself than to her. Or maybe someone made sure it looked that way. His voice carried a weight of suspicion now, a seed of doubt that neither of them could ignore. Kira stepped closer, watching his every movement, fascinated by the way his fingers moved so differently from her own, the way his skin reacted slightly to the cold air. He didn't seem dangerous. In fact, there was something almost peaceful about him, something grounded. She had never seen a human outside of a screen or a file never like this. "If it's true," she said carefully, "then the station has been keeping us apart for no reason." Elias looked at her, his expression thoughtful. "Or for reason they didn't want us to question?" Kira felt a chill that had nothing to do with temperature. She had followed rules all her life, trusted the words of science officers and doctors. But now everything she believed about humans was being turned upside down. "Why would they lie?" she whispered. "Why go through all the trouble?" Elias didn't answer right away. Instead, he sat down on the edge of his bed, clearly deep in thought. "Fear," he finally said. "Fear is a powerful tool. It keeps people from asking questions, from getting close. Maybe someone decided long ago that it was safer if humans stayed separate." Kira took in a deep breath, her mind racing with possibilities. If humans weren't as dangerous as they were told, what else had been hidden? Was this an isolated error, or part of something bigger? The room felt heavier now, filled with unspoken questions and the echo of old lies. She looked at Elias again, not just as a caretaker now, but as someone at the center of something much larger. He seemed calm, but behind his eyes, there was fire, curiosity, anger, and something else she couldn't quite name. "You didn't plan this, did you?" she asked. Elias gave a soft laugh, not mocking, but weary. "No, I was just tired of the suit. It was suffocating in more ways than one. I thought if I removed it in small steps, I'd trigger some kind of reaction. I didn't expect you to walk in right when I did." Kira nodded slowly still, trying to make sense of everything. "But I'm glad I did," she said after a pause. "Otherwise, we wouldn't know the truth." A silence settled between them again, but this time it wasn't awkward. It was filled with new understanding. Something had changed, something that couldn't be taken back. Kira, once afraid of being near him, now found herself wondering what other truths had been hidden. Elias, once a silent shadow in a suit, now felt real, vulnerable, and more alive than ever before. They both knew this moment would have consequences. Someone, somewhere, would not be happy to learn what had happened. But for now, they shared. A quiet agreement? This was no longer just about safety. It was about uncovering a secret that might shake the entire station. And neither of them could turn back now. The silence between Kira and Elias did not last long. For Varix 9 was not the kind of place where secrets stayed buried. Despite their efforts to erase traces of the unexpected contact, the station's medical AI flagged a biosignal anomaly the moment Kira had entered the human's room. The AI systems, always watching for any unusual biological activity, quietly reported the event to Central Health Command, and within hours, messages began to circulate through hidden channels. At first, it was only the medics and security personnel, but soon, whispers reached the ears of delegates, scientists, and political observers from over 100 species. Something strange had happened inside the human ambassador's quarters, something no one could ignore. Elias, unaware of the full scale of the growing interest, sat at his workstation going through old logs from Earth's diplomatic archives. He had seen it before how a single misunderstood action could spiral into panic, how fear of the unknown could shatter decades of peace. He remembered Earth's early years of space travel when first contact with alien civilizations was met. Not with celebration, but with suspicion and emergency quarantines. Those memories returned now, sharper than ever. He knew how these things started: slow investigation, then growing fear, and finally containment or worse, isolation. Kira stood behind him, reading the data he displayed. She, too, had received a quiet warning from her own supervisor to stay away from the human ambassador until further review. "They want to test you," she said softly, her voice filled with worry. "They say it's for interspecies safety, but I know what that means. They want to lock you down, keep you under glass like a dangerous specimen." Elias looked over his shoulder, meeting her eyes. "They don't trust what they don't understand," he replied. "I think if they control the unknown, they can protect their own kind." Kira's tail twitched, a subtle gesture of unease. "Then we show them there's nothing to fear," she said, her tone firm now. "We do it before they come with containment teams." Elias raised an eyebrow. "How do you plan to do that?" She moved to the center of the room, speaking with quiet urgency. "You go public, you meet others not secretly, but safely. Step by step, with protocol, with witnesses. Let the evidence speak for itself." Elias leaned back, considering her idea. It was risky. The moment he stepped outside without his suit, all eyes would be on him. One wrong move could undo everything. But the more he thought about it, the more he realized it might be their only choice. "If we wait, they'll write the story without us," he murmured. Kira nodded. "Exactly. We can either let them call this a breach, or we turn it into a revelation." The plan began to take shape quickly. Kira would reach out to trusted, contact species known for their fair judgment and respect for science. No politicians yet. No military officers. Only those with open minds. Elias would appear in controlled settings, in sterilized environments with approved species, monitored closely to ensure there was no threat. Every step would be recorded, every result archived and published. The goal was not to convince everyone, but to start a chain reaction to create enough doubt in the old narrative that the truth would have a chance to grow. As they worked late into the night, assembling data, designing the testing protocols, and rewriting safety procedures, the atmosphere in Elias's quarters changed. It was no longer filled with quiet, cautionate, now carried purpose. Still, in the back of Elias's mind, the worry remained. What if something did go wrong? What if the original warnings about human exposure were not false, just incomplete? What if Kira's case was an anomaly? But then he looked at Herstrong, healthy, determined on, remembered that truth was not built on fear. It was built on proof. By morning, their plan was in motion. Kira had secured a private meeting with a group of scientific observers from neutral planets. Elias would meet them in person, wearing only basic sanitation layers, not the full containment suit. It would be the first time a human had ever stood unshielded in the presence of multiple alien species. The next day would mark the beginning of something new. Whether it ended in triumph or tragedy was uncertain. But one thing was clear: this was no longer just about one Maid entering the wrong room. It was about challenging the fears of a galaxy. proving that the truth could be stranger and more hopeful than anyone imagined. The summit chamber on Varix 9 had never felt so tense. Delegates from over 100 alien species filled the seats in a perfect circle around the center stage, where lights hummed quietly and scanning systems blinked with anticipation. The air itself seemed to hold its breath as everyone waited for the moment that would either confirm their worst fears or reshape their understanding of humanity forever. Here in the center of the chamber, the door slid open, and Elias Rohn stepped. Inside, without his containment suit, gasps and murmurs spread like a wave. He wore only a light, sterile uniform, exposing his human skin to the atmosphere of the station. The gathered species had all read the warnings. Human exposure was dangerous, potentially lethal. They had expected alarms to blare, sensors to spike, protective fields to activate, but nothing happened. The systems remained calm. The air filters stayed silent. And more surprisingly, the delegates themselves, many of whom were sensitive to even slight biochemical shifts, remained unaffected. No pain, no weakness, not even a headache. Bioreaders installed throughout the chamber continued to show stable, healthy vitals for everyone. Some observers squinted in confusion. Others stared in open awe. The chief medic from the Zalari Union stepped forward with a portable scanner and began sweeping it slowly across Elias. Her eyes narrowed at the readings and then widened again. "There's something here," she whispered, but her voice carried across the silent room. "His cells. They're emitting low-level regenerative signals." Another delegate, a creature with translucent skin and antennae, raised a hand. "I feel clearer," they said, "like a fog is lifted from my mind. Is this from him?" More voices joined. One of the Vortani scribes, who had a history of chronic neural strain, claimed the discomfort had eased. "Zarnian guard," said he. Felt a strange boost in muscle response, like he had just emerged from a healing chamber. The medical scanners confirmed tiny boosts in cellular activity among the closest observers. Nothing dangerous, nothing harmful, just ... better. Elias stood quietly, letting them process the reality for themselves. After a long pause, he stepped forward, and his voice, calm and steady, echoed across the chamber. "I was told that human biology was a threat," he began, "that we carried instability, danger. But maybe the truth is more complicated. Maybe we were feared not because we harm, because we change." Eyes followed him as he walked slowly in a circle, never rushing. "What you feel now, these shifts there, not accidents. Humanity is still young in the galactic picture. We've adapted quickly, maybe too quickly. But we were born in pressure, in storms, in struggle. Maybe that pressure did something to us. Maybe it gave us more than just survival. Maybe it gave us a spark." A ripple of silence followed, heavier than before. The delegates looked around, uncertain. If the old warnings were wrong, what else had they misjudged? One of the senior observers from the Central Coalition finally stood. "You're saying humans evolved, not just to resist, but to improve those around them?" Elias nodded. "I don't have all the answers. But what I do know is this. Humanity isn't a plague. We're not here to poison. We're here to ignite something new." The words settled into the chamber like slow-moving light, catching the attention of even the most skeptical species. Elias turned toward the Zellary medic, who had been quietly scanning his tissue samples. She gave a small nod. "There's no threat," she said, "at least not in the way we thought." Another voice, belonging to a tall, crystalline being, broke the quiet. "Then the real question is, do we fear the unknown because it is dangerous, or because it is different?" Elias remained still, watching the crowd, letting their own thoughts build the next conclusion. Change had come not through force, not through control, but by standing quietly in the center of fear and being something else entirely. Outside the summit chamber, reports of the demonstration had already begun to spread across Varix 9. Within hours, transmissions would reach other stations, other systems. And soon, the story of the human ambassador who walked unshielded among the galaxy's elite without causing harm. But instead, awakening strength would begin to echo in places far beyond this hall. But for now, inside the chamber, one truth was clear. Humanity might be more than the galaxy expected, and far more than it feared. After the summit, everything changed. The silence that once surrounded the name human was replaced by whispers of curiosity and wonder, and in some corners, deep uncertainty. News of Elias's demonstration spread like stardust across the galaxy, reaching even the farthest colonies and hidden research stations. Scientists who had never dared to study human biology now requested samples, data, and even interviews. Leaders who once spoke against human contact now held emergency meetings, trying to revise policies built on fear and misunderstanding. How could one species, isolated for so long on a distant blue planet, evolve such strange and powerful traits? Elias had not only survived exposure, he had seemingly helped others thrive. That idea was both inspiring and terrifying. Across the station, debates sparked between those who saw humanity as a gift and others who still worried about the unknown. What else lay hidden behind that once feared suit? Could other humans possess even stronger abilities? Were their immune systems just the beginning? Kira remained by Ilias's side through it all, no longer just a translator or liaison, but a trusted partner and voice of reason. She understood the weight of what had begun, not just a political shift, but a deep rewriting of truth. She and Elias proposed something never attempted before, an interstellar research pact that would not only study human biology, but also reevaluate all species that had been misunderstood, feared, or excluded from galactic systems. It would be a place for truth-seeking, not prejudice. It's for science, not secrecy. At first, only a few agreed. But when delegates began to remember their own species' dark history's times when they too had been feared or hunted, they began to see Elias not as a threat, but as a mirror. Earth had struggled alone, yes, but perhaps that very struggle had shaped humanity into something uniquely resilient. In time, more stations joined. Varix 9 became the heart of a growing alliance. New labs were built, shared archives were opened, and for the first time in centuries, long silent doors between species began to open. Elias continued his work not as a symbol of danger, but as a beacon of possibility. His presence encouraged other humans who had remained hidden or restricted on off-world colonies to come forward. They too were scanned, tested, welcomed. Some had stronger healing abilities, others heightened senses, and some simply offered calm to those around them. It became clear that the human body was not a weapon, it was an adaptation masterpiece, shaped by hardship, by climate, by emotion, and by the deep desire to survive. But more than biology, it was humanity's spirit that intrigued others most. The creativity, the persistence, the need to explore even when the odds were impossible. Kira, who had once feared Elias's touch, now stood beside him during Interstellar. BROADCASTS, translating his words not just into languages, but into meaning. She had seen the shift up close, the way others now looked at humans with awe, not suspicion. The way children in distant systems played games pretending to be Earth's explorers. The way walls once built from fear had begun to crumble into bridges. Of course, there were still dangers. Not everyone welcomed the change. Some feared what could not be controlled. A few rogue groups called for renewed containment or exile. But those voices were fading, drowned out by the rising hum of discovery, of shared knowledge, of unexpected peace. Elias knew the work was far from over. Questions remained. What long-term effects did human presence have? Could those regenerative signals be harnessed for medicine? Were there limits to human adaptability? But now those questions were asked with open minds, not clenched fists. Humanity, once hidden behind glass and suits, had stepped into the light. Not perfect, not above others, but worthy of standing beside them. As the stars shifted over Varix 9, as ships moved across star maps with new coordinates and new missions, one truth remained at the core of it all. This was no longer a story of fear. It was a story of awakening. And in the center stood a human, not as a warning, but as a spark that had started something far bigger than himself. In the quiet after the storm, As the Research Alliance settled into its rhythm and delegates shared meals rather than arguments, Kira looked over at Elias and smiled. "They feared you would bring destruction," she said softly. "But all you brought was change." And change, at last, had begun to feel like hope.